I'm afraid to ask questions because people will find out that I'm not as intelligent, I'm not as talented. Who's gonna watch this? Do I even have the enough knowledge to even speak about this? And who the hell do I think I am? If you are asking yourself these questions on a daily basis and they're running through your head, this video is going to be diving deep into the strategies of imposter syndrome and how we can overcome that once and for all. So let's go. So in order to overcome something, we have to find out where it came from. So let's identify a few points. So it comes from childhood experiences. Imagine being constantly told you're not good enough. You begin to compare yourself to others, but also you develop feelings of inadequacy. And so there are three components that we mentioned in the first video already. So feelings of inadequacy, feeling like you're not good enough, and comparing yourself. The next thing, it can come from cultural and societal expectations, where there is a high emphasis on success and achievement rather than inner ability and self-trust, and so you have pressure to measure up. So not only is the pressure coming from others and society, it's also can be from personal traits. So you might have perfectionistic tendencies, and a lot of us do, and that means we place high self-expectations, and we have anxiety, focusing too much on self in terms of self-consciousness, and therefore the anxiety comes from the fear of fear itself rather than the triggers of the external. So now we've identified that a lot of it can come from anxiety. We can run through some techniques to lessen that anxiety. So solution number one is learning to breathe properly. By breathing properly, I mean better, because people with anxiety, they tend to breathe rapidly and very shallowly, constantly over time. So the way that we do this is we place both hands on our abs and think about pushing the muscle up. Breathing up, you push the ribs out and you have your fingers on your ribs pointing down or pointing up, as long as you feel your ribs coming in and out. We're going to make sure we are breathing, making sure that the out breath is longer than the in breath. This is how we calm the system. And then we pull the shoulders to the ears and release and push down your hands to your thighs and repeat that twice. Next solution is a technique that we call thought stopping. Thought stopping is when we pay attention to the negative cycle in our minds, that when we hear the negative thought, any thought, we immediately shout or say aloud to ourselves, stop. The reason we do this is to recognize every time we have a negative thought, but making sure that we stop this cycle this time instead of just noticing and not doing anything about it. So that will break the pattern. Other techniques involve visualizations that we have in hypnotherapy. A technique that I'm going to share with you is called blow away. In this technique, we are given the discomfort of anxiety or any kind of discomfort that you feel. Imagine giving it a structure of its own. So in this case, imagine a bright red ball in the stomach, and then visualize bringing that ball up into the arm, up to the shoulder, down to the arm, and then into your hand. Then you want to describe its weight, its size, its texture, its shape. And when you are ready, you can simply release. Open your hand and you blow away the discomfort, or you just simply release it. Some people will have a subtle effect of this, and some people will have a burning sensation. Whatever you feel when you are releasing, that's what you're meant to feel. This is a very powerful technique, because when we give a structure to something that is separate from us, we are able to see that it's something that we can detach from and release, instead of it clinging on to us and identifying it as us. Another technique for anxiety and fading the pain away, we can imagine that we are sat here looking in our mind's eye into an airplane, that we are loading all the stresses and all the worries into this plane, and we are going to watch them simply fly away. This is another powerful visualization. Why do I always have a problem saying this word? We can visualize putting the worries and anxieties into a bag and doing like a spring cleaning, taking it again to a separate place from us. All of these techniques are releasing. And so when it comes to imposter syndrome, we know that it comes from previous rejections and previous failures, and with that obviously it's going to make it difficult for us to trust in our own abilities. And whenever we are listening to the external powers and forces that are telling us that we're not good enough, we are looking outside of ourselves, and we have to practice turning inwards. And as useful as it is to listen to outside feedback, we really have to switch it around and use internal feedback to determine who we are first. When it comes to comparison, we know that imposter syndrome people tend to compare their own chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 2. It's very unuseful. The same as an apple and an orange are fruits. They serve a very different taste and color and purpose in making fruits have variety. In the same way that each planet has its own qualities, we do not need to compare two people against each other. So practical steps for comparison: you can unfollow people who make you feel insecure. You can lessen your notifications, turn them off, so you're not constantly reacting to your phone like a trained seal. This is something that helped me a lot. And we have to work on our self-esteem. We have to ground and also drop into your body. So there are an array of things that you can practically do. There is a reference to an article that I'm going to talk about that is called "Why Does Everybody Feel Like They Are Faking It?" by Leslie Jamison. Basically, in this article on imposter syndrome, I will link that in a description for you to read. She said that there is a very big difference between the messages that we receive from our parents and the messages that we receive from the world. And so we question, are my parents right that I am inadequate, or is the world right that I am capable? Again, notice that neither is energy inward. It's all about listening to the outside. And conversely, are my parents right that I am perfect, or is the world right that I am failing? And so what happens is that there is a confusion between, well, are my parents wrong, or is the world wrong? Imposters begin to do everything possible to prevent being discovered in their self-deficiencies, and this hugely links to the 3 versions of self in shame. This is why shame is such a big shadow for the humans. I'm human too. Shame is a huge thing that we as a collective consciousness needs to work on. Practical ways to combat this it's keeping an "I'm not an idiot" file. Make a list of all the things, or list all the things that you have achieved, all the capabilities, all the abilities that you have. Focus on the positive. Another technique is the Gestalt method of owning parts of yourself. So you are accepting and understanding their functions. So remember that we have these different parts of ourselves that we need to integrate, and when we have a sense of toxic shame identity, we tend to hide away parts that we were shunned, not accepted, that we too have shunned away in the darkness because we want to relate to the caregiver. We want to be accepted. In the article, she mentions empty chair work, a technique where we imagine a conversation with somebody that meant a ton to us and we deemed as important, and then we play out both parts in the conversation, taking ownership of the whole situation but making it the way we want it to go. And a part of integrating all of these different parts is that we need to understand that whenever we select a self that we present to the world, that is driven from shame. So I highly recommend you to check out Bradshaw work on inner child healing. I will create more videos on inner child work and shame work. The advice in the article is that we have to normalize that imposter syndrome is not a disease. It is an experience that we need to stop pathologizing and recognize it. It's not something that we have to fix. Capitalism, we're made to feel like imposters in order of ensuring that we work harder, we compete with other people, and we make endless progress. We make more money and we try to be better than those around us, and this ties into the grind culture. So be careful of that, but it's also really good to know. When it comes to shame, we have false self that we are presenting to the world and our true self. The self dwelling in two different worlds at once. Sometimes that makes us have like an emotional filing cabinet where we file all the spontaneous emotions that we're not really allowed to deal with in public. We file that away. Imposter syndrome is not a syndrome, but an inescapable experience, part of being alive. And I think that takes off a lot of the pressure that we have going on for ourselves in terms of being perfect, or we have this imposter syndrome, this abstract idea of something that is taking over us, but it's actually not a syndrome. It's not a disease. It's an experience that humans experience. Solution number, God knows I've lost count now, is to explore your shame parts. Shame exploration involves different parts of self. When we come into the world, we have a will that is broken by an external thing, so like family or a situation or something bad that happens, and growing up somebody breaks that will of us being whole and valuable. And even though we are already whole, people say that we are either good or bad. Essentially, if you've heard of Teal Swan's work, she mentions there are three selves: the shame self, which has healthy shame, which is good; the vulnerable self, the real self; and the protector self, which is all the defense mechanisms that we present in a certain way to the world. Remember that all these different parts have a really important, purposeful role. When we get stuck in the fragmentation of shame, it develops into a toxic shame that can bleed into our identity. People go two ways. They develop more than human belief, or they see themselves as less than human. We need to establish that neither view of self are accurate. And this is exactly what I was talking about when it comes to imposter syndrome and presenting a certain type of self. So in conclusion, overcoming imposter syndrome is a journey of self-discovery, and by implementing the strategies we have talked about today, you'll be on your way to reclaiming each and every part of you and integrating that with confidence and embracing your true self. Most importantly, living with authenticity and integrity. The upcoming videos, I'm gonna dwell deep into shame work and inner child work as well, because I see a lot of people projecting and not integrating the parts of the self that could help you further on in life. A lot of people disown parts of themselves because they were told to or taught to before. So thank you for joining me on this journey, and I look forward to connecting with you in the next video. Stay tuned. when I'm alone.